Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am so excited for this conversation I have today with Megan Stubbs that I'm sure is going to be a titillating conversation, to say the least. And we have so many fun areas that I know we're going to delve into. Megan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on. And please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit more about your journey and what it is that you're magical and passionate about and how you show up in the world.
Wow, that's a lot. Thank you so much for having me, first off. I'm a sexologist. That's the job you didn't see on Career Day. And it seems very apropos that this is a conversation about journeys, because if you had asked a young Meg back in the day, was this your journey to be a sexologist? I would have been like, no, what? That wasn't even a real job. But ultimately,
can you define sexologist first? I want to hear all about the journey, but I'm just because, as I hear the word ologist, I'm thinking of a mixologist, like a bartender, creating all these amazing concoctions. And I know that's not it at all. And it's just where my mind was going. But I want to hear the whole journey, but just define right off the bat, what is a sexologist?
Yeah, so I'm someone who studies sex. So broken down even more from that is what people do with their bodies and then how they feel about it. And so my particular area of work is education. So I'm out there helping to normalize the conversation around sex and not to get too far ahead, but I do education both in person.
Okay, we'll get to all of that. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so now as we understand what young Meg would have never said, I'm going to be a sexologist when I grow up. I'm going to help understand what people are doing, why they're doing it, how they're feeling about it, and then how to help them. How did you get to becoming a sexologist?
Yeah, young Meg would have said, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a surgeon. I'm going to be chopping up bodies and digging into viscera with my fingers. But all the while growing up, I really had a strong passion for reading. And so I read everything and anything I can get my hands on. And then when it came time to learn about puberty and changing bodies, I was fascinated. So I made sure to consume every single book I could about changing bodies and periods and growing up. And that conversation wasn't being had in school. So it was really a self-led kind of journey. And I became that friend you go to ask about sex stuff. And so that just
all the stuff that felt really too taboo to even talk to your parents or probably even your doctor about it, right? That you just felt comfortable going to your friends.
Yeah. I mean, this is middle school time where it's what's fingering? What's blowjobbing? And it's oh, let me show you. This is what I read. And so that continued on into my high school years. Academically speaking, I was super good. I'm still good at science. So I was very good at science. I had a passion for science. And that, led me to believe okay, I'm super good at biology. I can go be a doctor. I love medical stuff. This will be great. So I graduated high school and I went to college with a pre-med emphasis, my biology degree with a pre-med emphasis. And when I got to college, everything was awesome. It was great. I tested into upper level biologies and I was taking Spanish as a minor because I was I'm going to be fluent in Spanish too, and took medical terminology in Spanish.
Wow.
I took chemistry and that was not good. That was the worst. And it was a rough 3 years of me struggling. And I'd never failed a class before. And I failed multiple chemistry classes. And I was just what's happening? So, I lost a scholarship. I was in not a good place. And I was just okay, let's drop the pre-med emphasis because you had to have so many chemistry classes to make you ready, air quotes, for med school. And I was just I can't do this anymore. I'm going to get out with a general biology degree and figure it out from there. And all the while in college, I was still your go-to friend. So the conversation had evolved from periods and fingering to hookups and, one night stands and threesomes. And so I was still that friend you went to. And it wasn't until I was reading Cosmo that I saw the word sexologist. And I was where was this job on Career Day? That was not offered.
Yeah.
And so I like Googled back then and I was like, sexology, grad school. And lo and behold, I went to one of the few graduate schools in the country at the time that offered graduate degrees.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like this is even better than being a doctor or
It's a
medical
real
doctor.
legitimate, right. It's a real legitimate field of study.
Yeah. And so then I went to grad school in San Francisco and
Okay.
it was eye-opening. And it still does feel like a natural fit because I just love this topic so much, both like anecdotally in my own sexual exploits, but also teaching and giving permission and helping people make empowered decisions for themselves. Like that fills me up with so much, I think even more so than any other job could do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've got so many questions. My first one was, were you raised in an environment in which sex conversation was open and accessible in your family? Because for so many of us, it's a taboo topic, right? It's a hush hush, that's embarrassing. And yet there's no one on the planet that this doesn't affect to some degree, of course, right? And
Yeah.
so where did you get the openness to delve into topics that were otherwise hard to talk about?
There was never really any kind of like off limits topics when I was growing up. My mom encouraged me to read whatever I wanted. So that was a lot of like, Goosebumps and, classic, young adult books. But also when I expressed an interest in learning about changing bodies in puberty, it was like, okay, go pick out your books. And then I'd come to the book to the cash register with a stack of books and she'd just be like, all right. We never had like a, one day at dinner we're eating and suddenly it's like, we're going to have a talk, gather around and like, oh,
Right,
it
right,
just
right.
kind of just was just like, I don't know, understood that I was well versed. I had all the books. So I really didn't have any questions. I was just like, I got my books. I've got all the answers here. And
So when you were in middle school and people started coming to you and asking questions, those at that time was based on books or was that based on experience? Were you open to sexuality early in your life? Like where did that piece come into the empirical knowledge?
yeah, that was middle school, very formative years. So that was a mix of books. And then back in the day, there was like YM magazine and like
Oh yes, loved
17.
YM.
Yeah. And so all those, young adult magazine, juicy tidbits they'd save in there. Um, that all, was informative. And of course, then we were like, experimenting and playing around with our friends and trying stuff out. And then like very, I don't know, experiential education as
Sure.
we were young. And of course, that grew as we got older, as did the knowledge base.
Sure. Well, and I think that's such an important thing. And I go back to the household, that you grew up in around it. I've got two teenage daughters and they're 15 and 17. And I got divorced when they were about 7 and 9. And so and they're with me the majority of the time. So as, the primary parent in their life and being the mom of two daughters, I recognized really early on the importance of open communication on a variety of levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy. And as a therapist, I obviously work with a lot of parents in which as soon as their kids ask any questions, it's the parents who respond in fear or embarrassment, or they're shy, or they all of a sudden like see this as a huge question or a huge conversation. And their own anxiety of not knowing how to answer it just shuts it down. And then as soon as it gets shut down from one question, the kids learn, oh, I can't talk about that, or I shouldn't ask that question again. And so I love that you grew up in an environment was like, sure, you want to know this? Great. Let's learn about this.
Yeah, I mean, time and again, we've shown that the more information you have, the delay of the sexual debut or the first sexual activity onset happens. I mean, I can only think of one topic. Sex is the only thing they want to limit, the people, society, want to limit
Right.
education around because it's still so taboo. Even in 2021, it's like, listen, it's in billboards, advertisements. Even if you live under a rock,
Yes.
you're going to see a billboard somewhere and be like, oh, sex. It's just it's
Right.
so pervasive in the culture. And so unless we have topic or talking, unless we talk about this and we have education around it, you have no control of the education they're going to glean from sources like entertainment, media, pornography, which are fine in their own right, but absolutely no replacement for a proper education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the first education is how can I feel comfortable around this topic?
Yeah. I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would love to see, probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but just like we teach core classes, math, science, how to write well, we got to have a sex ed class every single year, because there are so many facets and nuances and things going on that for it to be shoved into a week, if it gets a week in the health class once in a formative year, their high school life or whatever, that's not enough. Like, it's ongoing.
It's not enough at all. And, I anecdotally have a couple of things that are funny to share, but, with my daughters, like I said, I've always really tried to maintain that open communication. And they were pretty young. And there was one night we were watching Friends. And, as an adult watching Friends, I didn't realize how many sexual undertones and innuendos there are until you're watching that with an 8 and 10-year-old. And I'll never forget one of the times Joey was talking about having had sex, and my daughter, who was like 8, turns to me and says, "Mom, you can have sex standing up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, okay." And like, we went back to watching the show. It wasn't this like, oh my God, she asked this big question, and now I've got to like hit pause and like be dramatic and make her feel uncomfortable. It was, okay, the more matter of fact I responded, the more matter of fact it became. And that was really opening the door to this. And I wish not just the education in schools, but the education in homes to get this level of comfort around something that is as natural as breathing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And oftentimes children just want a little answer like that. They don't need to know, like, they're asking about positions. We got to get the Kama Sutra out. I got to talk about lube and height differentials. You just said, yeah, you can have sex standing up. Cool. Thanks. Moving on.
Like, we interpret it as a really big question. They're just asking something simple.
Yeah.
So in your journey, so you went to graduate school for this, which is amazing that there's even degrees. And so what did you do from that point on?
I moved back I'm from Michigan, still in Michigan. I moved back to Michigan, and I was like, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to like write so many books and probably have a TV show in 5 years. It's just going to be great. So that didn't happen. I mean, we're like a decade into this, and I just now have a book coming out. But
hey, you got the book coming out. So
I got a book. Yeah.
Don't undermine that. You got there.
Yeah, a little different journey, but we're still there, hitting those milestones. But when I came back to Michigan, I had a lot of friends in media. So it was really through them that I was able to grow my voice and spread the message very slowly, because this is a conservative area, about relationships and sexuality and body image. So I, appeared on local morning shows. We had like a kind of like a women's talk show in the morning. I did that for a few years. I co-hosted late night radio on our top 40 station. And I started writing for our local women's magazine. And so I just like put in the work. And so looking back now, I know I should have celebrated the wins more.
But it's so hard. A lot of wins to me, Megan.
Yeah, but it's so hard when you're in the thick of things, being like, this isn't like, I want more. So now I'm trying to be really mindful of like, celebrate all the wins, big and especially the small, because they all add up to, if you look back, where were you a year ago? And it's like, oh, I guess I did a lot of stuff. But it's just that mindset of like, what's next?
Of course. Yeah. We all get stuck in that hamster wheel.
Yeah. So growing the platform, growing the brand, learning how to speak more eloquently, and just gauge, what's the public asking for? Like, what do they want to know? And so transitioning that into just really education based. So I speak on college campuses now virtually, but
of course,
hopefully back in person soon, and talk to students about sexual assault awareness, how to have safer sex. And then, so those topics range, from mild things like that to, wild, of like your guide to sex toys, or, just undressed, ask the sexologist anything, where students can really, get down to the nitty gritty and ask the questions they want to have answered from a reputable source, me.
Yeah.
And then I also spend some time with the lifestyle community and teach sex shops, which are a lot different than what I teach on college campuses. Those are hands-on and like, more explicit, but it's just, it's just fun to help people feel better about what they're doing, whether that is choosing to be abstinent and not have sex, which is great, awesome, affirm that, or someone's like, I want to get into swinging and be the center of attention with a threesome. Amazing. Yes, let's support that too. I'm just here to spread the information.
What do you find people are most lacking in information or awareness around when it comes to their own sexual journey? I mean, that's a huge question. So I apologize in advance because I don't think there's a simple answer, but what would you kind of believe is where people get really stuck in their own sexual journeys or exploration or acceptance of themselves?
I think the overarching theme is a communication, but in like a self-declarative way. Like people don't want to speak up, or maybe it's advocacy is what I'm looking for. They don't want to advocate for the things they want or need. So that's why we have so many stories about like bad sex or like faking orgasms. And it's like, if people felt empowered enough to communicate their needs to their partner, or felt empowered enough to seek out the sex they actually want, we would see less upset in this space. But it's really hard when you're taught from early on, from people asking, your kids like, oh, you're so cute, you're 2 years old, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend yet? And it's like, whoa, relax. Like, no, they're kids,
Right.
It's just pervasive again in the culture that certain ideals, should be happening, like misnomers of like single people like me. Why am I single in my mid 30s? What's wrong with you? Oh, you're never going to find a husband. What about your biological clock? And it's like, ask me what I want for my life. I don't have to follow this, get, graduate, go to college, get married, get a house, have 2.5 kids. Like that's what we would all say is the, norm. But in reality, the norm looks like a bunch of different journeys, to bring it back to
absolutely. Exactly. Well, and I would think, coming from the work that I do, I think the communication piece and the self-advocacy is an integral part of where people end up with really unfulfilling experiences and unfulfilling sexual relationships. And part of, I think even before communication, what often comes up, I think, is a lack of self-awareness of even their own needs, because before being able to communicate them, you got to know what your needs are. And you got to know what you like, what you don't like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And the communication is secondary to even knowing yourself. Would you agree in what you see and what you teach?
Oh, 100%. And then even to touch on that, if we're learning about sex education, that part, the self-exploration, the self, discovery, that's never included. If it is, it's told in a sense of like, no, don't touch yourself. That's dirty. That's bad. It's sinful. Save it for your partner. And it's like these mixed messages. It's no wonder why so many people are having difficulties finding fulfillment in the relationships that they're in. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. And so how would you say people can get really more in tune to their needs, in tune to what they even like? Because I imagine some people in which, sex awareness was really repressed, or it's being taught as dirty or wrong. And, the opposite of those open homes and cultures. And maybe it's some religious base to it. And so there's some fear or anxiety around even that exploration. So for people who have some of these major roadblocks that prevent them from opening themselves up, literally, figuratively, emotionally, sexually, right? They stay really shut down. How would you say to help overcome some of those roadblocks?
First, it has to start with permission. Know that you can grant yourself the permission to explore yourself. I'm a professional. I'm in this space. I'm an expert. And I'm telling you, it's 100% natural and a-okay to explore yourself. And I both mean this in the question what you're interested in, and also touching yourself and getting to know what your body likes, what kind of sensations feel good to you. Because it's often not, thought of a curation time. It's thought of like, yeah, I probably like when my nipples are stimulated or people touch my clitoris. That's probably a standard one. Yeah, you're probably right. But what about, someone caressing your cheek or your neck? What about fingers down your belly? Like, make time for you. Make a dedicated space where you can go explore with no time constraints. It's not a quick, like, I got 10 minutes in the shower. Don't do that. Be purposeful of this encounter and really just get to know yourself and see how you can build arousal and build pleasure, especially if you are new to this space because you've had past messaging about, touching bodies is wrong or some maybe religious conditioning. Take time and go slow, because experientially, that'll help heal the relationship with your body.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I tell almost all my clients is the brain is the biggest sex organ,
Mm-hmm.
especially for women. And, so any mindset or thoughts that get in the way, we've got to address those, because before we can even allow ourselves to relax into that pleasure or that touch, is going to have to start with, how are we thinking about things? How are we looking at it? What is our view and our lens through which we're observing? And one of the things that I like to talk about and teach my clients is, and there's actually a book by the same title, which is Better Sex Through Mindfulness by Lori Grotto. And it's, this fabulous idea of, especially women in relationship really struggle to relax and enjoy and to be present. And that we're so distracted, we're so busy, we're so cut off from our own bodies, and we're so living up in our heads that when it comes time for sex, we don't even know how to drop in. We don't even know how to allow ourselves to feel. Like we're literally cut off from the neck down. And it's going to affect not just our emotions, but it's going to affect our ability to even feel what we're feeling.
Yes, 100%.
And it's pretty amazing. And her book, I believe she's Canadian, and she's done some research in which she studies women's physiological response for being turned on. And she has them watch some porn and insert like a vaginal device, what I imagine is like a vibrator with some sensory things on the end of it, that determines wetness responses and lubrication and heart rate. And she'll ask the women as they're watching the porn, are you feeling aroused? And they'll say, nope, nothing, I'm not feeling anything. But all of the physiological cues actually in their body is showing otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even recognizing what's going on inside their own body, because we aren't taught just to slow down.
Yeah.
And so, this is why I think mindfulness is the answer to everything, even better sex, better self-awareness, because we might be engaging in things that we don't even know that we're feeling. And so no wonder women are unfulfilled, because they're not even like able to be present in their own bodies, because we're distracted, or we're building resentments, or we've had, a tiff with our partner that we now are shut down from being open. And mentally open is the same as physiologically and spiritually and physically open to this other person, let alone ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just in this little instance of our conversation, we've listed off so many things that just say how varied and nuanced arousal is. It's not just one thing. It's so many things. It's a mind connection, body connection, desire connection. Like there's so many things at play. So it's no wonder that some people might feel like, yeah, no, I'm not turned on. But it's like, no, you are. But what's going on mentally? Oh, I'm thinking about the laundry. I'm thinking about, did I turn the dishwasher on? Like all these different things. And it's so common and pervasive in the culture. And that's, nothing's wrong with you if you are that person that we're speaking to right now.
Of course not. Of course not.
Absolutely, start to improve that. I mean, there's always room to improve. And so you're not a lost cause. Like you can absolutely get to a space where you can feel those feelings.
And I think you're right. I think permission is a beautiful first step. Permission to feel without any judgment at all, without any shame. Because for a lot of people, there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around their own bodies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, permission is like the first thing, because it's like, maybe I have this desire to learn, or maybe I want to try mindfulness and touching myself. But if I don't give myself permission, or if I'm feeling guilt around it, like, no, you get to advocate for you, and you have permission right now. So do what, makes you feel okay.
Do you have any language you like to guide people in how they can name or communicate that to their partners when they don't otherwise have a working model for how to communicate that?
That they need to go slower?
Anything, because I think that's where people, once they might start feeling that they want to explore, slow down, explore different possibilities, but don't have the actual words to know what to say. So what might be some ways that people can communicate to their partners when they're otherwise embarrassed or shy, or literally just don't know what to say?
Sure. When anything like this, or maybe it's you want to try new sex or something, I think an easy way to just broach the conversation is say, hey, I read this article or heard this podcast.
Yeah.
where people tried X, Y, and Z. Would you be open to trying that? That way they can say, oh, okay. And so it doesn't make them feel pressured that you're like, I want to do this. Are you down? Better say yes. So
Right.
that's one way. Otherwise, just tell your partner, hey, I would really like tonight, or maybe it's today, who knows? I'd like to try tonight to really, do good foreplay and just slow it down and just see how that, goes. I've noticed I've been kind of checking out lately, or I'm having a lot of stress and anxiety, especially pandemic times. Everyone's feeling
Sure.
stress. That I
Sure.
just want to slow it down and, see how that goes. And hopefully you have a loving partner who you're communicative with and also who hears you. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's try that, because ideally they want to have you feel good during the encounter too. So just say, let's just try to slow things down. You don't have to say this whole long backstory of like, I'm discovering myself and I'm feeling shame and I don't want to upset you. And just say, let's just try to slow it down. And then after
Yeah.
you have whatever activity or encounter you do, debrief, do some aftercare, talk about it. Say, how did that go for you? Did you like it when we did this or that? And then see what you can plan for next time.
I think that's a beautiful intention. And I know experientially with clients, one of the challenges, and this is not, it's going to sound like a huge overgeneralization. So I apologize in advance to the listeners if I'm generalizing and it doesn't apply to you. But oftentimes, men can have a really hard time with feedback, especially if it's, I didn't really like how you did that. I prefer you to do this, because it's very easy for a man to believe he knows what he's doing in sexual endeavors. And part of the challenge becomes every body is different. So if it's a new partner, you've got to be able to take that time to explore their body in the way that they need. And so I just want to invite, it's not really more of a question, but more of just a comment that if you get feedback from your partner that maybe something wasn't as good as they thought it might have been, to just be really compassionate and open in receiving that feedback. And that it's really for the intention of building greater connection, greater intimacy. Because if your partner shuts down your feedback, the likelihood of you giving feedback again is going to go way down. So even if you make the assumption, I thought I was being a great lover, I thought I was doing it slow, I thought I was touching you the way that you liked. And if your partner shares, actually, I've never spoken up about this, but I really prefer this way, just keep your ego in check. This isn't about you and being a good performer. This is about pleasuring your partner.
100%.
And
I like to say too, check your ego at the door, because there's no place for that in the bedroom. You're not performing. You're not on the set. This isn't like the Olympics. There's no first prize. This is just an experience you're sharing with someone. So yeah, ego has no place in there.
And what would you say, because I get this question quite often when I work with couples, is couples who are experiencing really challenged connection intimately, perhaps never had it in their relationship, and would otherwise label it just bad sex or bad chemistry. Do you believe it's possible to create something that may have never been there?
Yeah. So are you familiar with sensate focus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know, this is a practice of where you are just mindfully touching your partner with no kind of like goal-oriented orgasm at the end. You're just touching for exploration and pleasure. And I think if you practice that, if you strip everything down and go old school, if you start just building pleasure and arousal and curiosity about each other, no sex on the table. That's not even on the menu right now.
Yeah.
You're just exploring and touching for pleasure. That can be really fun. Maybe you start to expand this into genital touching, but again, we're not, it's just again, slowing things down. Because if you think, we're just having jackhammer 5-minute sex, it's not fulfilling. Yeah, that doesn't sound great. Not to discount quickies, but if this is a continuous thing for you, I always say strip it down and go back to old school. And also talk about what's going on in your lives. What kind of stresses are you feeling? Are you feeling, like you said, hidden resentments? Like what's going on? Try to get down to the root cause, because I think you can build something that might have been hidden or wasn't there on the surface, because it probably is there because you're in a relationship. So just try to explore that and see where that takes you.
Yeah. I love Esther Perot's statement, which I've actually heard her say, but I don't think is her original quote. but she says sex is emotion in motion. And I love that so much because, I've, through my own journey, experienced what I now have in my relationship with my fiance that is incredibly amazing intimacy. And it shows up in all levels, right? Intimacy does not just happen in the bedroom, intimacy happens all day long. And, in all aspects of your relationship. And when you're cultivating this intimacy and your ability for vulnerability and honesty and openness and receiving and communication, it's going to highlight, and it's going to manifest in a very deep sexual connection. And so, I guarantee if there's other areas in your life in which you're struggling in your relationship, it likely is going to show up somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It'll eventually show up affecting in your sex life.
Yeah, I agree.
So that idea of, sex as emotion and motion, it's reflective of so many aspects, and doesn't have to necessarily be this deep long-term partnership. It can just be about attunement into our partners and connection with our own body. And, it's kind of like body empathy. If I'm aware of my body, I can be more aware of yours. I can be more attuned to your experience if I'm attuned to mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So I know for many women, and you mentioned this in your intro, that you work with body image, and this can be a huge roadblock to being open and receiving to create better sexual experiences. So tell me a little bit more of the work that you do with body image.
So I do this when I write a lot because I was writing for a magazine back when I first came back to Michigan, and just spreading the word because I'm of Japanese descent. So we're getting naked and going to onsens, which are like outdoor spas. And so you see all kinds of bodies. And then also me teaching in the lifestyle at, clothing optional resorts, I'm seeing all kinds of bodies. And all of these body variations, everyone is able to experience pleasure. Like there's no prerequisite of how your body needs to look to experience pleasure. Yet so many people, especially women, feel held back by how they look, or, lumps, bumps, rolls, whatever, scars are holding them back from, I don't know, their like ultimate pleasure because they're feeling self-conscious. They're not letting themselves be open. And that was just like devastating to me. And so helping people understand where our body image comes from, again, the media, the culture, society, and how that impacts us. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. I mean, if it's not New Year, new me energy, it's, beach body season, or it's dropped the Thanksgiving holiday weight. It's every season there's some shtick of like, here's how you can lose weight to look better and feel happy. And it's like, skinny is not like the gateway to happiness. And so helping people understand that right now, whatever iteration their body's in, it's good, it's valid. Not saying you can't change your body, but right now in this space you occupy, in this body you occupy, you're deserving of pleasure and having your desires be met and seeking out partnerships that make you feel good about yourself. So it's just like, again, giving that permission for someone to say like, don't feel like you have to hold yourself back. Go have bountiful sex, wear that outfit, take the photo. I mean, so many things. Wear sleeveless. I mean, I could go on.
Yeah. And yet it's a very real thing that keeps us stuck. And it makes many women feel so insecure. And yet we know that, confidence is the most attractive quality we can have. So the more acceptance and self-love we can offer, the easier we are going to have to share that with others.
Yeah, for sure. I try to model that in my everyday life. Like I'm not a skinny person. I am all the curvy, thick things you want to say, but I'm not a small person by any means. And I try to live my life out in public, take photos and show that like, I am not a runway model, which is fine because they're beautiful too, but doesn't take away from my own beauty because I don't look like them.
Right.
I can embody this body and shape and still be happy and go do things. So hopefully that makes someone somewhere who has a similar body type be like, oh, I guess I could go do that too.
Yeah. And that's, easier said than done. And that's why it's a process and a journey. And yet I think what we're saying is it's possible. Even if it takes the baby steps to get there.
Mm-hmm. And there's no real end destination either. It's always going to be a journey because we're going to age. Our bodies are going to change. And that's okay. That's what bodies do. That's what we do when we age. I don't know. There's some quote about like, it's a privilege to be old.
Yeah.
you've lasted this long. And so unless you're going to nip tuck and Botox everything until you're 90, people are going to know you're old. So
Right.
embrace the journey, embrace the changes, and just, let nature take its course. It's okay, whatever iteration your body's in.
We're all human. And we sometimes forget that, being human is inherently imperfect, and there's nothing wrong with that those are all the root markers of our lives. I was talking recently with a client around the lines on my face as I've gotten over the past few years, and how to reinterpret what those lines mean. My smile lines are like, okay, that's an effect of my communication, my joy, what I'm sharing with others. Like, we have to, it's to me, it comes again back down to mindset. How am I interpreting what I'm experiencing?
Yeah, 100%.
So it really feels like part of this conversation, it needs to address, what about trauma? And, what do you teach with people who have had sexual trauma? And this is a huge question. So I know this isn't all going to be an all-encompassing answer, aside from getting, real help with any PTSD or trauma that you have regarding any sexual abuse, but for kind of a little bit more of a bite-sized nugget around if anyone has felt and experienced sexual violation of their bodies, of how to re-engage safely and comfortably in a sexual relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I think a great starting place is healing that relationship with yourself and, seeing how those feelings come about where it's just you, there's no pressure of a partner or anything else going on. So starting with you and seeing how that goes. And then if you want to add a partner in the future, during your talks about consent or discussing things you like and dislike, you can just really easily communicate without having to tell them a big backstory, because maybe it's your first or second date. You can just simply say something like, I really do the sandwich. I really like, lip kissing. I don't like it when I have like a hand around my neck, but I like it if you would, give me a pat on the bottom, okay, great. Mm-hmm. That way you can express boundaries, because maybe a hand around your neck is traumatizing to your future partner. So they're not going to suddenly slip and, do that to you. And you'd be like, oh no, I don't like that at all. So having this conversation beforehand and, expressing in a way that you're comfortable, because you can disclose as much or as little as you'd like to. But a really simple way is just saying, hey, I'd prefer if we didn't do sex from behind. Okay, hey, thanks for letting me know. Just tell me, what's going on with your body, and I'll listen. That's
and let's hope that people let's hope people respect those boundaries that we set. And if they don't, then they're not the right partner for you.
That's
and
not
you
the
don't
right
have
partner,
to continue having sex, right?
Absolutely.
I did an interview earlier on when my podcast first started with a sex researcher, and she had really great language for this around asking our partner either to try something that we wanted, or, if we got asked if we wanted to explore something. And the language she put to that was, I'm not available for that right now. And I like adding the right now, because perhaps as you get safer in that relationship, maybe you'd be open to it later. And I like the languaging around, I'm not available for that. I think it really gives some beautiful permission to honoring your own boundaries and naming that. But I think the key there is to not completely shut our partner down, because again, our sex lives are reflective of all aspects of our relationship. And if we feel shut down, we're going to likely limit opening up about something else, right? So it's really, in my mind, staying open, compassionate, aware, and not judging or dismissing what our partners are saying.
Yeah, for sure. It's being that like empathetic listener and comprehending what our partner's saying, and also the ability to communicate things to our partner as well.
Right. There's so much here. And this is an area I see so many couples struggle with. And, the challenge of, especially in long-term relationships and parents who've got kids, and time is not in their favor. And, I'll always say to couples, you need to schedule sex. Like, don't just wait for the spontaneous, where all of a sudden you're in the mood. And that likely may not happen spontaneously, because when you actually have the time and availability for one another, you're likely exhausted, or you just aren't, if you've got a little bit of extra time before bed, that may not be what you choose to spend it on. You might just want to be reading your good book, or, But to be able to schedule time for intimacy, I think is something that feels awkward. And yet it's also acknowledging this is a high enough value for me that I'm going to schedule time for it. And I think it's a misnomer for couples to just wait for the spontaneity of sex. There's nothing wrong with planning it.
Yeah, I had a professor, she's now passed, but she's so dear to me. She said people will spend more time and effort to fix their toilet than they will their sex lives, which is so true because you will call the plumber, you will block out the time, you will pay the exorbitant amount of fee that they get paid per hour. And it's like, wow, okay, that's for your toilet. How about your relationship? We can, I got 10 minutes.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah, it's like, no, this should be much higher on your hierarchy. So, I mean, absolutely, I'm a proponent for scheduling sex. And then for people say it's boring or not spontaneous, it's like, it's boring if you make it boring. You know, what's wrong with building the anticipation? If you know it's Wednesday, like, okay, Wednesday's hump day. We start in the morning. We're sexting. We're being playful. We're building that anticipation all day long. You know, make it fun. Like, I'm just thinking like how fun that would be. So it's not boring.
And so much of that for, you know, the everyday couple is really, from what I see, is really building that culture of gratitude and appreciation in your partner. Because it's really hard to give and to receive if you're not feeling connected. And so, you know, for those, you know, people out there who are like, wait, I want to have that. Like, yeah, that's possible. You just got to cultivate those patterns and recognize that foreplay begins hours outside the bedroom.
For sure.
So tell us about your new book.
My book is Playing Without a Partner, a single guide to sex, dating, and happiness. And while it is geared towards single people, people who are in partnered relationships can really benefit from the book too. It's just a lot about self-discovery and building that stable foundation that comes from within. So, which could serve people single or in partnerships, just helping you realize, like, cultivate you. When you are rock solid, you can do anything. You can, you know, go out and learn a new skill. You can go out and meet people. You can show up to your loved ones better, your friends, and maybe even a future relationship.
So what are some of the tips of how to be able to do that you talk about in the book?
Yeah, a lot of the beginning is about the self-discovery. So I do talk about masturbation and unlearning these body image messages. So making sure that we know our bodies right now, again, are in a position where we are deserving of pleasure and we can bring about our own pleasure. I mean, oftentimes we're our own best lover. Even if you've had great mind-blowing sex with someone else, it's like, no one does you like you. So, and for some people who are maybe serial monogamous, who are seeking out that partnership to get sexual gratification, it's like, shift that mindset and put it towards yourself. Because time spent on you is never time wasted. And see what you can bring about by yourself without having to get into relationships that might not be the best fit, but you're like, oh, but I miss sex. Have sex with yourself. Sex yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Megan, I think everything that you're doing is so necessary and so helpful and are making it so accessible. Just even the language in which we're talking about it, it feels normalizing. And that's something that I know in the work that I do is easier said than done because it doesn't feel normalizing for couples. And there's so many stigmas. And, you know, I just, gosh, there's too many examples that I can talk about, you know, but one of them is, I was working with a young couple who in their religion growing up was taught sex is, you know, kind of wrong and really prohibited sex. But then as soon as they marry, it's okay. But there's no shift in language or tools or what does it even mean to go from it's wrong to it's okay. And, you know, part of my work with them was talking about the importance of lube. Like when your body's not necessarily physiologically producing what it needs, it's okay to help you out with that. And I remember, you know, one therapy session coming back being like, yes, lube, thank you. Like what would have otherwise caused emotional distress over what wasn't working well, you know, it's just normalizing so much of this. And I love talking about sex with couples because they're so uncomfortable talking about it that I want to help create the space to make it a normalizing conversation. And if you're not talking about your sex life, I guarantee you're not talking about a lot of the things in your relationship that really matter.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you know, if it's even just in relationship to yourself, if you're shutting down your own sexual exploration, there's other things you're shutting down too. It's not just sex. And so I really see that this is this opening, this vulnerability, this allowing ourselves to allow and accept without judgment. It's going to affect so many aspects of our lives.
Absolutely.
So how can people find you and where can they get the book?
You can find me at sexologistmegan.com. The book is available for pre-order. It'll be released May 11th, everywhere books are sold.
Exciting.
And if you want to connect on social media, I'm at Sexologist Megan on all the channels.
Perfect. Well, Megan, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and your tools. I know that there are many people who need to be hearing this information, and we'll definitely get all those links in the show notes so people can get your book and learn how to have a better relationship with themselves and others.
Jory, thank you so much for having me on. This is a great conversation.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.